In this recording, we're going to work on your practice exam, problem number 2. Problem number 2 deals with plant-wide and departmental overhead rates. So we have this Wilmington company has 2 manufacturing departments, assembly and fabrication. It considers all of its manufacturing overhead costs to be fixed costs. The first set of data that is shown below is based on estimates from the beginning of the year. The second set of data relates to one particular job completed during the year, job Bravo. So we have estimated data for assembly, fabrication, and total, and then data for job Bravo. So requirement number 1, if Wilmington used a plant-wide predetermined overhead rate based on direct labor hours, how much manufacturing overhead would be applied to job Bravo? And if Wilmington uses departmental predetermined overhead rates with direct labor hours as the allocation base in assembly and machine hours in the allocation base in fabrication, how much manufacturing overhead would be applied to job Bravo? So first, the formula for manufacturing overhead is our application rate is calculated as the estimated overhead divided by the estimated application base. So if we're looking at a plant-wide rate, we're looking at the total column only. We don't care about assembly and fabrication. We're just looking at this final total column right here. So in this case, our application rate, we were told in requirement 1, if they use a rate based on direct labor hours. So plant-wide, what we would do is we take our total overhead divided by total direct labor hours, because again, in requirement number 1, we were told that it's based on direct labor hours. So for our application rate, what we would do is we take the 1,400,000 and we would divide it by our total direct labor hours. Again, we're just focusing on this total column right here. So our total direct labor hours are 80,000. So actually doing the calculation, 1,400,000 divided by 80,000 gives us $17.50 per direct labor hour. Now that we know that, all we have to do is know how many total direct labor hours were done for job Bravo. And of course, the answer to that is 14, because once again, we're still just looking at the total direct labor hours. So the answer to that is 14. So our overhead applied is going to be the 14 direct labor hours multiplied by our $17.15 application rate. So doing that calculation, I just take 14, multiply that by 17.5, and I'm going to get $245. Okay, now we're going to work on departmental rates. So with departmental rates, we're still going to use the same formula that we have up here, estimated overhead divided by estimated base, but now we're going to have two different columns. We're going to do it in assembly, so we'll have an assembly rate and we'll have a fabrication rate. So let's work on now departmental. So now in part 2, they tell us that direct labor hours are the allocation base in assembly. So in assembly, we're going to look at the manufacturing overhead and the direct labor costs. The machine hours in assembly are just not going to matter. And machine hours are going to be the allocation base in fabrication. So for departmental, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to calculate our assembly application rate. So to calculate our assembly application rate, we're going to take the assembly overhead and since we're told in the problem we use direct labor hours, we're only going to divide it by the assembly direct labor hours. So our assembly application rate is just looking once again down that assembly column, $600,000 divided by 50,000 direct labor hours. So doing that calculation, 600,000 divided by 50,000 is going to give us $12 per direct labor hour. Now we have to use our fabrication application rate. We're going to do exactly the same thing, but now we're going to concentrate on the fabrication column. But for fabrication, we're going to use machine hours. So since machine hours is the base in fabrication, there we'll take 800,000 and divide by the machine hours of 100,000. So now we're going to calculate our fabrication overhead. Our fabrication application rate. So that's going to be our fabrication overhead divided by our fabrication machine hours. So our fabrication application rate gives us our fabrication overhead, which is $800,000, divided by our machine hours of 100,000, which of course is going to equal $8 per machine hour. Now we have to apply the overhead, and once again the overhead is going to be applied in each category. So in the assembly department, since our application rate is direct labor hours, in the assembly department we care about the direct labor hours, we do not care about the machine hours. In the fabrication department, we're going to care about the machine hours, but we're not going to care about the direct labor hours, and the total doesn't matter. So for our assembly overhead applied, we're going to use the assembly application rate. And we're going to multiply that by, once again, since we're told in the problem that it's the direct labor hours, we have to multiply it by just the assembly direct labor hours. So in this case, our assembly overhead is going to be for job Bravo. Job Bravo in the assembly department used 11 direct labor hours, and our rate is $12 per direct labor hour. So we just take 11 times 12, and $132 of assembly overhead is going to be applied to job Bravo. Now we have to put in our fabrication overhead applied. So for our fabrication overhead applied, we're going to use the fabrication application rate and we're going to multiply it by the fabrication machine hours, once again because we're told in the problem that machine hours is the allocation base in fabrication. So in this case, we look down for job Bravo. Job Bravo used 6 machine hours. We multiply it by our fabrication rate, which is $8 per machine hour. So our fabrication overhead for job Bravo is going to be 6 hours multiplied by $8 per hour is going to be $48. So 132 goes in the first one for number 2, 48 goes in the second one for number 2, and departmental manufacturing overhead applied to job Bravo would be $180 in total.